What's up, design family, and welcome to another episode of FittDesign TV. So glad to have you here. On today's episode, we'll be looking at textile printing methods for continuous patterns. If you've ever wondered how your favorite pair of joggers or pair of leggings got its continuous floral or camel print, watch this video. We're going to be running you through the main methods. Hey guys, and welcome to FittDesign TV. So glad to have you here. On this channel, we discuss all things sports fashion, graphic design, manufacturing, and technology. We'll discuss key topics, answer pressing questions, and provide actionable steps on starting your own product line. If you're interested in any of the above topics, stick around. You're in for a good one. In a nutshell, we'll be discussing continuous pattern printing. So that rules out any heat transfer prints or sublimation prints. Yes, you can print one-off patterns onto these or using these printing methods. However, we're specifically going to be discussing continuous pattern prints. If you think about a pair of camel joggers, chances are that camel jogger was not printed as a one-off with the pattern just in the shape of your jogger. That jogger was made out of a roll of fabric that already had the camel print on it. So how do we get that print onto the roll? That's the challenge, and that's what continuous pattern printing methods actually aim to do. Most of these methods are actually based on an older technique of silkscreen printing. If you guys know what silkscreen printing is, you'll know that these screens are made and they're hand applied onto the garment, and essentially each color in that print is applied in different stages. So you create a screen for each of those different colors and you apply it by hand, and that's pretty much the method. There are more modern techniques of silkscreen printing that are much more operated or automated. However, that still is one of the main methods of applying colors onto garments because of the richness and the durability in the prints. So these methods are a variation of the traditional silkscreen printing method. However, they all aim to overcome the idea of this continuous print. If you look at, let's just say, a camel pattern. Camel pattern can have 4 different shades, 5 different shades. For the sake of this context, we'll be looking at a camel pattern with 4 different shades. Let's just say blue, red, green, yellow. The blue, the red, the green, the yellow each have to be treated as a different screen. We'll go into a little bit more detail about how these screens are made in a future video. However, the blue, red, green are made into different screens and they're applied onto the textile in different stages. The first method actually aims to solve this by having a continuous conveyor belt and having these screens set up at different parts of that conveyor. It's called the flatbed screen printing method, and essentially the way it works is you feed the neutral textile in at one end and it runs along 4, 5, 6, as many different screens as you need to get all the colors in. And in this context, we mentioned 4 different screens. You run the fabric through the first screen, a squeegee applies the ink through the screen and transfers that onto the textile. So you end up going from a neutral color to a neutral color with just the blue portion of the camel printed. As the squeegee runs through, it transfers the ink onto the textile, and the conveyor carries the textile away, so the textile that now has the blueprint onto the next screen with the yellow print, and the yellow print is applied into the areas using the screen that are specifically yellow. So you end up at the second stage with white textile base with your yellow print and your blueprint in the different portions, and then that textile is carried away to the third screen and the red print is applied, and the red print is specifically applied into the areas based on the screen where the red is meant to be, and then the textile carrying the blue, yellow, and red is carried away to the final screen where you apply the green print. That green print will plug into the final spaces, and essentially at this stage you'll no longer see any white or neutral color and you'll have a fully colored textile. And the beauty of this is you'll end up with a continuous roll of fabric that has that specific print on it. So you can kind of see here where the challenge of creating continuous prints is overcome by nature of having these calibrated screens and this continuous printing method. One of the major pluses of the flatbed screen printing is its relatively lower overhead cost, so you can run medium to larger production runs versus some of the other methods that may require larger production runs because of the complexity and the much larger overhead costs to kind of run these methods. However, also at the same time, because the squeegee is applying the colors individually, you also get a much better richness of color because you can control the amount of ink being applied, and that just creates a more robust and vibrant finish overall. The second method that we're going to be looking at is the rotary screen printing method, which is a variation of the flatbed printing method. If you look at the flatbed printing method as flat screens being applied in stages, these are cylindrical screens being applied again in stages. Each of these cylinders has a different part of the color on it, and you run the fabric through it perfectly, and as the fabric or as the screen rolls, it applies the color onto each of the different portions of the pattern. And once the textile is run through all 4 or 5 or 6 different cylindrical screens, you end up with the finished garment. What is amazing about this is its method of application is a lot faster because you don't have to wait for each of the squeegee kind of printing beds to apply itself onto each stage. What happens in the first flatbed printing stage is the textile comes in, it pauses for a second, the squeegee applies the ink through the screen, and then once the ink is applied, it goes through again to the second method. So there is though it's continuous, there's a break in that flow. With a rotary screen printing method, you never get a break in that flow because the application of the roller onto the textile depends on movement and the physical movement. You end up getting a much faster screen application versus the flatbed printing method. So one of the major benefits of this is you literally quadruple your production. So because of the added speed, you can end up creating a lot more fabric. So that creates more production and that can lower your cost per unit. But at the same time, because of the overall consumption, these printing methods require a lot more output in order to be profitable. You have to create more pieces. So that's a trade-off there. Because of the higher kind of overhead, you may have to create more, but you get a much better price. And at the same time, you also get that richness and that vibrancy in colors. The third is a variation, or it's like a primitive method of the rotary screen printing method. It's called the engraved roller printing method. So this was developed back in the 18th and 19th centuries, and essentially what used to happen was a copper cylindrical screen had the pattern or the design engraved into it, and it would be run up and down the textile to apply the color. Because copper is so soft, what they used to do is they chrome plate it for durability and for strength. So that's kind of a great method of them using what was available at the time and modifying it to, let's just say, to enhance the output or to enhance the functionality of it. Nowadays, we have the rotary screen print method, which is a lot more automated and it's a lot faster and a lot more accurate. There are actually, let's just say, foolproof systems in play that ensure that the fabric is not warped, that it's not desynchronized, that everything lines up perfectly, and all that is controlled by computers, whereas before you essentially have to control this by human eye, and that leads to a lot more human error. When it comes to making these screens, essentially most of these screens are just engraved, and like I mentioned, a pattern maker or the pattern, let's just say the pattern artist, would observe a pattern, distill it down to its different colors, and separate each of these different colors into the screen, and as many screens that are needed will depend on the amount of colors that are in the actual design. So that's something we touched on in the beginning, but when it comes to developing the screens, it's as easy as that. The final printing method is one of the most modern printing methods. It has its pluses and it has its benefits, or it has its drawbacks as well, but in a nutshell, it's also the digital inkjet printing. From a technical standpoint, it works exactly like a paper printer. You feed the neutral textile through, and once programmed, you really just get digital ink, or the ink being applied onto the fabric, and you end up with a printed textile. One of the major benefits of that is, one, it has a low setup time. Maybe there's a higher overhead cost because these machines are extremely expensive. However, it has a much lower setup time. So you also are able to print one-offs, or you're able to print in much smaller batches, which reduce the minimum order quantity or the kind of investment that you have to make into it. At the same time, because of its flexibility, it's a digital method, you're able to switch designs without losing your entire fabric, because you're printing all the pattern at the same time as opposed to in stages. With a flatbed printing method, once you feed in a roll, you have to see that roll all the way through, or else you lose pretty much that role because you're printing in stages. So there's also that overhead of once you feed your fabric through, you need to see it through to the end of the process. Versus with digital ink printing, you really just get that one-off method and you're able to kind of cut halfway through and switch designs, switch different things. So it's great for lower run manufacturing. It's a bit more expensive per unit. However, you are getting that added benefit there. One of the major drawbacks, in my opinion, is digital ink typically tends to be less durable over time, and the vibrancy in the colors is not necessarily as robust or as vibrant as screen printed method. So it is a give and take. It depends on what your specific use case scenario is, but those are the main printing methods that you guys can consider, especially for continuous pattern printing. If you're just genuinely intrigued or curious about those methods, that's pretty much it. If you guys think we missed out a major continuous printing method, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed the video, it would mean the absolute world to us if you could smash a thumbs up, leave a comment on what you'd like to see next. If you guys enjoy this type of content, please consider subscribing. It helps us out tremendously. We love making this content for you, and it just means the world to us when you engage. And really, thank you guys so much for tuning into FittDesign TV. Until next time, stay awesome.